Yesterday was the day that we should have taken action, but we sat back.
Yeah, we're super excited to have our two guests here today. The topic is the global deal for nature and the critique of indigenous communities across the world. And this is something that Survival International has been working on. Survival International is an international NGO supporting indigenous people across the globe. And they have launched the campaign, the 3030 campaign. I'm not going to talk much about it now. I think Fiore, you can explain it much better than I. And we're welcoming Fiore Longo. She's a campaigner with Survival International and leading on this campaign. And also Pranab Doley from Assam in India. He's a human rights defender and also the secretary of the Farmers' Rights Organization in the area, I think. So we are super thrilled that you can join. It's a little bit later already in India. Thanks so much for making it today. We're very excited. And I'll pass it on to maybe Fiore. Would you like to start to introduce yourself a little bit and talk a little bit about the work you're doing?
Yeah, thank you very much. Really, thank you for this invitation. And also, I'm very happy that Pranab is here with me. So I am a campaigner of Survival International, and I am coordinating our campaign to decolonize conservation and against the 30%, and I'm going to explain a little bit better what it is. First of all, I think that the most important thing to say before starting talking or explaining this is that what we really do in survival is to try to radically change public opinion here in the industrialized societies or in the global north. What we really do is not going to, I don't know, somewhere else to do projects, but try to stop the atrocities that our own society commits towards indigenous peoples. And I think that it's very important to explain also the campaign. So that's the first thing. The second thing is very important before starting talking about 30% is to say that this campaign is linked to our campaign to decolonize conservation. It's part of the same thing. So our criticism toward this global deal or whatever name it has, it changes every day, a new deal for nature and people, or 30% or whatever other name it has, is linked to our criticism toward the way that we protect nature, that we Western society claim to be protecting nature. So first of all, I will need from you an effort, because the way that we think about nature and we act toward nature here in the Western societies, and especially in Europe, it's based on a lot of mythologies. So it's a very difficult campaign because most of the things we criticize are things that are so linked in our mind to something that seems good, that is very difficult to make people understand, and also like the large public, why this way of protecting nature is wrong. So our third criticism is toward the idea that nature is wild, that nature is something, I don't know, a lot of trees and animals, something green, something that is wild, the idea of wilderness. We think that the idea of wilderness is a colonialist and a racist invention. There is nothing such as a wild nature. Nature has been shaped for generations by indigenous peoples and by other local communities that have lived in those spaces. The idea that those spaces are empty came from a colonialist idea. We wanted to occupy those spaces, so we just tell each other that those spaces were empty. The idea of the wild Africa, for example, is so linked to colonization and the reproduction of this ideology through, I don't know, National Geographic and all the other instruments by which our society wanted us to think that there was something like this beautiful, big, huge nature on one hand, and on the other hand, there were the people, two different things. The separation between nature and people is actually a creation of our economical system. So this is the first thing we criticize. Do the spaces that we call wild are not wild. The Amazonian, for example, or the Congo forest, the most biodiverse place in the world, and the places we think they are more wild of all are not wild at all. I keep repeating it because it's very important for what I'm going to say next. The second thing that is very important and that we criticize is the idea that we can protect the environment and we can protect nature with what we call protected areas. The idea to create protected areas, or national parks or tiger reserves, so with spaces where humans are not allowed to get in, comes from the 19th century. It was the first national park was created in the United States at the end of the 19th century. It was based, so the first national park, Yosemite and then Yellowstone, were created by evicting the people that was living inside. Again, with this idea that those spaces were beautiful, that nature is wild, and then human beings are destroying nature. So this kind of model, so creative protected areas by evicting people that we call fortress conservation, is racist, not only colonialist. So we said it's imposed by colonial powers when they conquer Africa and Asia, but it's not only colonialist, it's racist, because it completely denies the role that indigenous peoples and local communities have got, into the shape of these environments. So it completely denied the fact that those environments are so rich in biodiversity because there was someone there taking care of them. And it's also based on a completely wrong idea about humanity and humans, and as I said again, nature. The 80% of biodiversity is found in indigenous territories. There is a very important link, very strong, between diversity and biodiversity. The places where we have more linguistic diversity, for example, are the places where you find much more biodiversity, because nature needs humans as humans need nature. Ecosystems are made both by humans and by nature. Indigenous peoples and also local communities had a completely different approach toward nature as we have, and they do participate actively in those environments, and not just choose things that are separate. For example, the Baka people in the Congo and in Cameroon that I met during my field trips do a lot of things to make this environment rich in biodiversity, including hunting, including leaving some roots in the forest when they go to collect, so the elephants can go there and eat. They actively create those environments. And this is a very, very important thing to say. This story I'm telling you about protected areas is not, and colonial power is not only a history, part of the history, part of the past. This kind of model keeps continuing in the present. So when someone today wants to create a protected area, what they do is exactly reproducing this kind of system. Is first of all imagining those environments as empty. A lot of time environments and forests or whatever environment that is rich in biodiversity is described as intact, as pristine. Well, as I said, those environments are nor pristine nor intact. They have been shaped by human beings. So they first describe the environment in this way, then they decide to create this protected area where human beings are not allowed to get in, because a protected area by definition, unless by the definition of the category, the first 3 or 4 categories of the IUCN, that is International Union for the Conservation of Nature, are places where no human activity is allowed. So they go there, especially NGOs, international NGOs like WWF or WCS, decide that a forest has to be protected, that forest is pristine, is intact. And so they decided they have to create a protected area that could be a national park, for example. So the people that are living inside is simply evicted. It's not that the people are only living inside and, I don't know, and eating from nature. Indigenous peoples depend on in the environment, not only for their material subsistence, but they depend on the environment to be people as they are. So inside the forest, they get their medicines, they do their rituals. So they need the forest, not only just to eat, but also for their own identity. So once the conservationists decide that is a nice area to be protected, they just go there, they lobby the government, they push the people out. And then what happened is that what happened as a consequence is the militarization, because protected areas have to be protected from someone and by someone. And who are those people? Are people, armed guards, park rangers, who are paid mostly by those same conservation NGOs, even if they are officially employed by the states, and that are the people that have to decide who gets in and who get out of the protected area. Their role should be to fight against poachers, but they get, in most of the cases, they get a bonus of performance money every time that they arrest someone. So of course, they're not going to be arresting the high rank officers who are accountable of poaching. They will end up arresting everyone who gets in to hunt, to feed their families, to collect, I don't know, leaves. And this is not just a random example. We are in contact with people that have been arrested, put in prison because they went inside their own forest to pick up, I don't know, mushrooms or leaves or like medicinal plants to heal someone in their own family. So this is the kind of model of protected area that is very spread across, as I said, Africa and Asia especially. And this is the situation, this was the situation, this is the situation until the day of today. So it's important to know this context and to know a little bit about the story of conservation. As I said, it's part of the colonial power, is mostly led by big conservation NGOs who not only destroy the people living there, but also partner with the worst companies in the world. But it's important to know this context to then understand what happened when the proposal, the solution to mitigate climate change and stop biodiversity loss comes from those same organizations that have been doing all of this. And this is where the 30% arrive, the 30% issue arrive. The 30% is a proposal, another proposal, as I say, to mitigate climate change, to stop biodiversity loss. And I repeat, it comes from organizations like WWF, Wildlife Conservation Society, African Parks, and governments like the French government, the German government, that has been destroying the people and the nature until the day of today. So we should raise questions just because of this, where this proposal is coming. Second, what this proposal is about. They said we can sort of all the problems of the environment if we just set aside the 30% of the earth. So we just create protected areas to arrive until the 30% of the earth under protection. What means to be protected for these people means creating protected areas. So spaces where we know most of the cases, no human activity is going to be allowed. And those places will pass from the control to the communities to the state control. So protected areas are controlled by the state. And even if all the evidence we have, every scientific study that has been conducted in comparing protected areas and indigenous territories, every study shows that indigenous territories protect nature better than protected areas as a category in the places where indigenous territory exists as it is. For example, Peru or Brazil. All these studies show also that inside protected areas, the land doesn't belong anymore to the community, but pass under strict control of the state. Also, companies can get in and destroy those environments. We have seen, and Pranab can say more about this, protected areas in India, evicting the people that are living inside in a sustainable way, and then getting tourists and hotels and teak plantations And whatever happened that the government to give money to the government in that moment to be allowed. So then when we see these examples, we realize like the solution clearly can't be a protected area. So the 30% is this proposal. Let's set aside 30%. This will mitigate climate change and stop biodiversity loss. Why we are criticizing it? First of all, as I said, this solution comes from the people that have been destroying the world, so we have to be suspicious about it. Second, as you see, a protected area is not a place where it's not a protected area national park in Germany. This is how the world would look like. These 30% of protected areas won't be created in Germany or in Paris, in France. It will be done where there is biodiversity, as is indicated in the proposal. The proposal says we will create 30% in the places where there are more biodiversity. And this biodiversity is not, as I said, in the countries that destroyed it already. This biodiversity is in the south of the world. So these protected areas are going to be created in the south of the world, where we know that the model, the dominant model will be like very strict protected areas where no human being is allowed. So we are going to ask the people that less contribute to climate change and biodiversity loss to pay the price for something that they haven't done. And all of this is already tragic, but it wouldn't really actually do anything for biodiversity. So we are criticizing it from a social justice perspective, why we are asking those people to pay the price for something they didn't do, from a human rights perspective, but we are also asking to stop this project from, if we want to say, biodiversity perspective. Those protected areas are not going to protect the biodiversity or stop climate change. This is just a lie. Well, first of all, because you can't you can't just protect the 30% and then keep doing whatever you are doing in the 70%, because climate change doesn't have borders. So it's going to affect anyway what is going on in that 30%. But we know also by scientific studies that protected areas are not protecting anything, are actually worse. But also, and I think it's very important, this model is denying the fact that we need diversity to protect biodiversity. There is not such a thing like nature and then humans. And last thing is diverting the attention. So why is diverting the attention? Because the attention is going to this solution. All the governments are very happy, like yes, let's support it. While the real solution should be not think about what is going on in the global south, but what is going on in the global north. So what we have to do to stop the destruction of the planet, what we have to do is not just setting aside the forest in the global south. We need to change the way we consume, because we know that the destruction of the environment is led by the overconsumption of the global north and the extraction of resource. And I think this is the most important thing. So what are we doing about this thing? I think so this target is going to be discussed. It's not just something, it's not that they are saying, let's put aside 30%. This target is going to be adopted inside what is called the global framework on biological diversity, which is kind of very weird political tool. Is an instrument that is going to set the goals, if we can say, for the environmental agenda of the next 10 years. And it's going to be adopted during the meeting of the parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity, that it will take place in October in China, this October. So it's a meeting of the parties, the COP15, and they will also adopt this goal. So who wants to adopt this goal? All the governments of the world. It's the perfect solution, mostly all of them. It's a perfect fake solution that they can push to say that they are doing something about the environment when we know it is not true. And it's going to guide the environmental agenda for the next 10 years. So we have to do something. We have to stop it. We have been doing all sorts of actions, writing to governments, to delegates, but I think that the biggest change we can really we should really push. It's not the change of the governments alone. It's as only a real change in public opinion can lead to a real change. And what we have been noticing is that a lot of people that really cares about the environment, really cares about the climate, a lot of climate activists and people inside the climate movement are still not aware of this and are not still speaking out. I think that we are not here trying to change, I don't know, the vision of people like Trump. We know that we can't change the vision of those people, but the problem is the people like us, the people that really cares about humans, that really cares about nature, and they are not aware of this problem. Those are the people that we should be targeting and the people that we should be having discussions with. And I do think that pressure coming from all the people that really care about the environment and about climate issues and about all of this, about social issues, a real push from these people toward the government to adopt another kind of solution is the real only way that we can move forward. I think that we are in a crucial moment. We don't have more time to waste, and I think that the governments and companies and business are completely pushing us into the wrong direction. Companies, as governments, really want the 30%, as all other claim nature-based solutions, because they want to sell us the idea that we can compensate emissions, so they can keep polluting and then planting trees or funding protected areas somewhere else, and then they can say that by funding protected areas, by planting trees, we can mitigate the effects of the emissions they are producing. This is also a lie. That is why we are calling this campaign the big green lie, because we think this is a lie, a green lie, but always a lie. And well, I think that's it. I will stop now, so Pranab can.
Yeah, thank you already for this. This is, I think there's a lot we can go into, and we will go into today. I think it's a very complex topic, and when I first heard about it, yeah, it's quite shocking. It kind of breaks with your stereotypical views about nature protection. So yeah, thank you so much for presenting this already. Before we go deeper into this and questions for everybody, Pranab, I would like to hear from you a little bit about, not just in relation to this campaign, maybe you could start off introducing a little bit your work in the area as a human rights defender, and then afterwards touch a little bit maybe already on you know, how deals like this are affecting communities like the ones you are protecting as well.
Yeah. Am I audible? Thank you everyone for being present here. And at the very onset, I would like to thank all the comrades from Extinction Rebellion for giving me this opportunity to speak in front of a global crowd today. And thank you, Fiore, for setting up the context, I mean, on a global basis, the way you have put it up. Now, I guess definitely I'll try to contextualize the problematics which she has raised in terms of my lived experience in Kaziranga, because I come from Kaziranga, which is UNESCO World Heritage Site declared in 1985. And it's also considered to be one of the most successful wildlife conservation projects in the world. And in the meantime, I would also like to give my introduction. I come from an indigenous community residing around Kaziranga National Park, and I have been working as a part of the community and a political agent for the past few years. And to give the news to everyone, like I also stood for the state assembly elections in the year 2021, and though I didn't win, I came second, which was a major victory for the fraternity that we stand for, the progressive, the indigenous communities, and global comrades everywhere. And the conservation, the way it is being articulated in today's time, how more and more like the hegemony of big NGOs are rising. We can see that like it's basically the whole narrative is being taken away from the real people. So it's being the people who actually are the ones who are affected, whose territories are taken away, whose life ways are being destroyed, where communities are getting disrupted. They are invisibilized. And then you have few brands, I mean, where you see like where they claim about numbers. It comes to numbers and big names where they're talking about 30% or some percent of nature that needs to be the earth that needs to be conserved. At the very onset, I don't know where they get this magical number from, like 30% and boom, you are done, like the world is going to be saved. I mean, it's very colonial in its own mindset. It's an understanding which is just pushed upon people and communities like who are at the margins. And with all the horrible things happening in conserved areas, protected areas across the world, I mean, definitely I won't be able to talk about all the places because we know the numbers that have come up in Amazon, the number of people who have been killed just for standing up for their own homes. In Africa, in Asia, different parts of Asia, in different countries, in even North America, in the USA, in Canada, where we hear horrible stories of how indigenous communities are being treated. I mean, it really angers us that even in today's time, when we talk about a world where like we talk about humanity, we talk about dignity, but there are huge section of the people in the world who are being treated as substandard, subhumans even today, like who doesn't have any right to stand for their own dignity and their being, their existence. So in India, like if I bring it to the context of India and my own home ground where I come from, like, and we have tried to take up the issue not only as individuals from this territory, but definitely got in touch with the global fraternity, and Fiore has been a part of our struggle for very long. Sophie is, yes, she has always been there with us, stood for us, and the global fraternity has stood by us as well in many times, in times of distress, in times of trouble, when we have needed people, when we have needed the voices. And this is one thing which Extinction Rebellion also very pragmatically proves, that the global struggle needs to come together. People need to come together everywhere. Now, if I contextualize the whole fact, how this 30% for nature, or just very specifically putting more and more importance on conservation of wildlife and protected areas can be detrimental to nature in itself, like we have to come to an understanding of how people see nature. Like the community that I come from, like as an indigenous community, as a scheduled tribe community, like our understanding of the cosmology or the places that we reside in, like we as a community, like communities have their churches, communities have their temples, communities have their mosques and mausoleums and different spaces of worship. But for indigenous communities like us, our spaces of worship is our very surrounding, which is replete with the rivers, with the hills, with the wildlife, with all sort of surviving elements or beings in this earth. And our prayers are dedicated to these entities, to these embodiments of our being, where we are talking about living a shared life with the wildlife. Well, if a farmer is cultivating his land around Kaziranga, or where he prays that like the share which the animals need to survive will have for them, and the rest which he leaves should be there for us, for people to survive. That's the kind of coexistence that human and nature share. And definitely with changing times and changing economic conditions and changing policies of the government, people have been pushed to a point where traditional ways of life are no longer sustainable. And for that, we definitely have to blame a larger economic system, which is pushing people into that front. And so when we see in Kaziranga how the continuous process of dispossession has taken place, how Kaziranga, if today it's said to be one of the most successful conservation examples in the world, at what cost has it come? So Kaziranga was declared as a game reserve or as a sanctuary wildlife reserve in 1904. It was during the colonial times, and Lady Mountbatten, Edwina Mountbatten, Lord Mountbatten's wife, she had visited Kaziranga, and there were a few locals who took her around and showed her the existence of rhino in this global hotspot, eco hotspot, Kaziranga. And then since there was also a lot of poaching that was patronized by the colonial government at that point of time, these spaces were used for hunting them. It was not the locals who were hunting down rhinos, and because there was no reason to hunt rhinos for the local people, because they could not use, what do they do with the horn? What do they do with the skin? What do they do with it? So there was practically no reason for people to hunt rhinos locally. But it was motivated by and well thought out, it was an adventure sport for some, who came there for hunting for sport. And then when the local people showed the space to the lady who had come down, and then also requested or asked or brought up this whole issue of maybe having a preservation for the animals. And that's how the whole story started in 1904. And in post-independence in 1970, Kaziranga was declared as a national park with 423 square kilometers, almost 430 square kilometers of land mass. And that's when the Wildlife Protection Act, the militarized form of conservation that started in India as well, where you had to move away people from the protected areas. And Wildlife Protection Act was also levied, and then post that, this 430 square kilometers of inviolate territory was created, and gradually people were pushed away from their spaces. They were not given the right to access their own resources anymore, and they were done this with guns and sticks, and they had forced this upon the local people. We have stories that we hear from our grandparents, from our community people, from the communities residing in the area, and still in numerous places inside the national park, this core inviolate area, which they say, have names which were given by the local communities. And the names itself proves that these were spaces that were used by the local people, by the local communities, before it was turned into an inviolate space. And post-1975, the whole regimentation started. There was more arming that came in, and guns were given to the forest officials. They were given more rights to, say, incarcerate and also levy charges and taxes on people in different ways. And so this went on, this continued, and there was this whole struggle across India, not only in Kaziranga, across India, for the forest rights, where indigenous, a lot of people in the name of creating protected areas were thrown out of their homelands. And then there was this whole, the national level, India level struggle. And finally, they managed to bring up a law in order to correct this historical injustice on indigenous and forest dwelling communities in 2006. They got the Forest Right Act. It is one of the progressive acts in conservation or forest history in the world, which talks about giving habitat rights and user rights to people residing in forest areas. But somehow at the same time, the governments didn't want to, because there were vested interests of different conservation fraternities or wildlife fraternities who did not want people to exist with the wildlife. Since they had other interests in those areas, and they also brought in amendments in the Wildlife Protection Act, and especially in Kaziranga, they amended the CRPC, that's the Police Act, and gave policing powers to the forest rangers, forest guards in Kaziranga, as a result of which they could, with impunity, go and charge any people that they suspected of any kind of violating forest laws, and which had a very grave consequences among the communities in Kaziranga. And if we see in the period from 2007 to 2016, we see that a huge number of encounter killings took place in Kaziranga, because at the same time, the more and more modernizing of the forest defense forces started. There were different battalions that were created. There were special task force. There were special tiger protection force, special rhino protection force with sophisticated arms and weaponry, with night vision glass, with vehicles that started to patrol these areas. And as a result, unaccountable deaths took place, where from our research, we found that more than 50 people were shot dead in a time span of 3 years. More than 50 people, that's 20 people per annum, at a ratio of 20% people per annually. And that was with the excuse and the pretext of there is poaching happening in Kaziranga. And who were the victims? It was mostly the local people, mostly the poor local people. If they were into the poaching trade, as I said earlier, they didn't know what's the use of this whole rhino horn. But then we came to know from different sources. I mean, there's studies about it, that rhino horns are used as ornaments in different countries and as medicines in some countries, and there was a global market for it. And definitely the locals were not the ones who were running this global show or even the larger business of it. It was some other agents and factors which were never brought into the framework of justice, who were never tried out, who were never caught, or who were never searched for. So this is how the whole thing turned out, that like now more and more people are getting violated of their rights. And gradually the expansion of Kaziranga is also happening at the same time, since India is also a signatory to a lot of say global agreements, and they also the Paris Convention and their promise of like having 33% of the landmass turned into forest areas and everything, and as a major carbon sink globally. So there's more and more spreading of territories, more and more expansion of territories that is happening around Kaziranga. So it started with 428 square kilometer to 430 square kilometer in 1975. But today Kaziranga stands with, after 9 additions and 2 ranges, like the Pokaghat range, which is comprising of 190 square kilometer. Right now, the place where I'm sitting, the home where I am in, is also coming under that same territory. So today Kaziranga claims to stand at 1,000 plus square kilometers. So where is this land coming from? Like, did no one use the land? People use the rivers, people use the forest, people have been using these territories, but then suddenly from 430 square kilometers, which was again from the local stories and local history, we know that was the territory of people. And they were thrown out. Now it's 1,000 plus square kilometers. It's again more and more displacement is coming on our way. And this is the struggle that all of us have been continuing. And the story is similar across the country. It's happening in many different places. Just few days back, there was a news of indigenous people being thrown out of Nagarhole. There, people are fenced off, like they are put in, say, jails. It's like they are fenced off in their own territories. They cannot go out without the permission of the forest department, or they cannot come in after a certain point of time. And the same situation is coming over here as well, with the more and more arming, more and more guards, more and more policing. We see that in villages in today's time in our area, the people cannot go around their village once it's, say, 6 o'clock in the evening or something. They are questioned like, where are you going? So the basic civil liberties of people are getting curtailed. And if the same thing happens in a scale that this Nature's Tale is talking about, then we imagine like who are the people who is going to be most adversely affected, and it's definitely going to be the people in the margins. And that's why we stand against this arbitrary notion of 30% of the global surface that needs to be protected. Why not 100%? Why not everyone comes under the protected scheme? Why should the whole art not be protected? And basically it's a system that's biased towards the indigenous, that's biased towards the marginalized, that's biased towards the weaker section, and that's what we need to fight, and that's the larger struggle that all of us are carrying forward. And with this, I would like to, since there's a lot to speak definitely in this whole years of my own work here. I mean, there are stories of, not stories, but facts of where like we have been falsely incriminated by the forest department, by the mafias, by the people who were extracting benefits from this whole form of conservation, because they are the ones who can freely get access to the woods to cut trees and do smuggle them. They are the ones who get the access to the wildlife trade. They can smuggle it, but not the local communities. And while standing up against it, we have been framed, sent to jail almost 2 times by the forest department, and definitely by other agencies more than 3 times. So that's a regular thing that activists or political actors have to face when you are standing with the most marginalized. And in the countries like the global south, or say the third world countries like India, the whole system, it's so controlled, I feel, by policies and by the hegemony of a global south or the west, that they themselves become the colonizers here too, like the powerful elites. And it's a process where they just carry forward from where the whole colonial project left from here, and then they continue the same process, and within their own spaces they are marginalizing the majority of the people here. And it's a longer struggle which all of us have to carry forward together. Definitely, if there are questions, I would like request all of you to put forward the question. And at last, I would like to remind all of you and stand in solidarity, request you all to stand in solidarity with the forest communities across the world, and also the struggle of farmers and peasants that's going on in India. It has been on for the last 6 months. Millions of farmers have come out and gathered in the national capital in Delhi. More than 300 people have succumbed in this process. They have been martyred. And they're still standing strong just to protect not only the farm sector, but also to protect nature. Because without the existence of farmers, because the Indian government wants to amend the Farm Acts and bring in corporate farming. We have seen what corporate farming or large-scale farming has done in the Amazons and in different parts of the world. So we don't want corporate farming. We want minimum subsistence and existent farming laws, and the farmers needs to be strengthened further. And that's why I request all of you present here to carry forward this message that the struggle in India is going strong and the farmers need to win. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pranab. Thank you for sharing about the situation. And yeah, thank you again for being here today and yeah, sharing this. We have just maybe a few more minutes where I can just use the opportunity to ask some questions before we open it up. So everybody who's listening, maybe already think about questions you might have. You can already drop them in the chat, but like, yeah, just in a few minutes, we can just, yeah, answer all of your questions. I was going to go back to Fiore. You were kind of talking about how you're fighting this deal, this 30-30 deal. I'm wondering as well, now that we have heard from Pranab as well, how it's affecting communities. If you can talk a little bit about how these deals are made, maybe just a few practical insights that you have, because like, you know, how's the decision-making process about this? Like, you know, who is at the table when these decisions get made? And is there any way communities from around the world that are affected can actually have a say? Is it even possible?
Well, the first thing, I'm just laughing because it's tragic, not because the first thing it's important to know is that when the 30% start circulating among internet, and that's how these kind of things are built, non-government was pushing for it or anything officially. So it started by being a conservationist NGO proposal. And it happened quite often that you can see these proposals coming out in a scientific study that then you realize when you go to see who wrote it or who funded it, that they are themselves, the conservationists. And that there's no actually any science behind it. They are just themselves, that they do the science, and then they had the idea, and then they push it. Then this idea was introduced in the negotiations of the framework of the global framework on biological diversity. And these negotiations usually are formally involved and involve indigenous peoples, involve different governments. But they, when you go to these kind of negotiations, you realize that no one is taking care of the opinion of indigenous people. All the possibilities to make the participation real are not there. For example, just an example now with the COVID, the push of having virtual meetings, which of course it is something necessary because of the condition, but that means that a lot of people, that indigenous people, can participate, a lot of them, because their connections are not good, the networks are not good, the language in which these conversations are done, the language of like English, Spanish, or French. So there are a lot of conditions that make difficult the participation. In those conditions, no global framework should be accepted, because there is no real participation. And of course, none of this is actually happening. Then there is the technical language, that the lies, because they say this is the interpretation of this sentence is not the one that you think. Actually, there has been another meeting that said the opposite. So it's very complicated, and it's all made in a way to exclude radical views, not only indigenous people, but also radical views. So I think there is not really any real democratic process. But because, as I say, but this is not only about the negotiations of these treaties or whatever, it's also about how the projects are done, like the conservation projects at national parks. There is no, it's very important to know the reality, like the reality on the ground where we are doing a project. And there is no one in the design of this project that know the reality. Most of these policies about environment are done by people who don't have any idea about what indigenous peoples are, but not only about indigenous people, about social issues. Everything that has to do with environment goes under a biological approach, like a scientific biological approach. The idea that conservation is not linked only with animals or plants, but also with people and with humans and with social reality, because it's about how humans interact with nature, that's not taken into consideration. So that already the idea that to protect the environment, we have to ask scientific and biologists to ask them how to do it, is already completely wrong. So from the conception of the projects, and then we have who is controlling this project and who funds this project. So I mean, I'm not just talking only about the proposal, but then when you get the 30% created, who is going to deal with this project, how these projects are going to be funded? Well, we realize that most of the conservation projects are funded by Western countries. Into the funding, going to conservation, there is no one controlling what is going on with the money, because conservation is considered a not high-risk activity. It has to do with plants and animals. How can that be high risk? Non-control is done. And this is something we have pointed out a lot of times to European Commission, Germany, the United States, where are the countries who fund more about this. And now the things are starting to change a little bit. That means that governments like the United States had included something obvious, the consent of the people when you do a project on conservation. And the reason why there was not consent of indigenous people as a requirement to get American money to go to do a national park was because Americans didn't know that there were people in those parks. So you see that is an ideology behind. So this, as I said, this project, these ideas are not done in a democratic way, are done by people who don't have any idea who lives in the forest and why. And they are usually pushed by economical interest. It's not like by chance that we have the 30% today as a solution to solve our problem. It has been pushed by all the big conservation organizations who have ties and links with corporations, by corporations and by government who don't want to find a solution.
Maybe you can bring a more specific example about the ties to the industry. I know Extinction Rebellion in the UK, the youth group, they're preparing a campaign as well on WWF, World Wildlife Fund. But maybe you can, I think they've been named as one example of a conservation NGO that has actually corporates on their board. They're, for example, fighting plastic pollution across the world, but then have board members from Coca-Cola. It's just like, I don't know if they are still the board member right now, but I think there's a lot of links like that, just so that do you have any other?
Yes. If you have a look in any of them, from African parks to WCS, you can see not only, so having ties in the boards is already horrible, but then the directors of the organization, if you look at the CV and the past, they have all worked for companies that you wouldn't ever think. I'm talking about, I don't know, Shell or Unilever. So this is but you can say, well, someone has been working there, but now he understood the right path, and now they're not doing anymore. That's not the case. So it's not only about the past of the ties in the past of these people, or about the board. It's about the links they have, like they do today with corporations. So WWF or WCF, especially WWF, will claim that they are doing this partnership with companies like Rouget, who is a logging concession company that had destroyed a lot of the forests of Cameroon, and of forests that are from indigenous people. They will say, we do this partnership, we can be of different types, to help them to become better. So it's the policy we call sleeping with the enemy. They think that you can have a sustainable capitalism, that you can teach to these people how to get good. And this is the kind of partnership that is not only wrong, but divert the attention. There is no such a thing as green capitalism. It's not possible. So instead of criticizing these companies and saying, you are destroying the forest, you logging concession. If you look at the logging concession that are partnering with WWF, it's just disgusting. And they are saying, well, we are supporting them so they get better. But they are, first of all, they are operating in the land of someone else. You know, they are operating in the land of indigenous people. Second, it's not true. It's not true that these companies are going to become better. We all know it. It's divert the attention to fight the real cause. You know, WWF should be saying, I don't partner with any of them. You have to stop destroying the forest. This is what they should be saying with all the money they have. But of course, they have also all this money because they are not saying this. So this is the kind of corporation partnership we are talking about. You can also look at how much WWF, this is all online, supports sustainable labels. So they when you go to buy, I don't know, from your toilet paper to your, I don't know, food, you will see WWF logo on those on some products because they say they are sustainable. There have been a lot of scandals about how sustainable are. And also, if you think about like with your own mind, you realize that industrial production, it's very tricky to make industrial production, massive production in a sustainable way. So how they do it with all those products, we don't know. There have been a lot of doubts about it, and there's a lot of information in the internet. But the other thing that is very important is that these corporations, even when they don't partner directly with WWF or WCS, they take benefits from this kind of policies. When WWF say to the world, we can mitigate climate change by planting trees, or there are nature-based solutions, the person who benefits is Shell, that now say we can plant whatever, I don't know, millions of billions of trees in which land would be the question. So we can keep producing emissions. So it's not only about like direct partnership. It's also about that the model of protection of nature that WWF and WCS support brings benefits to companies.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe Shell has to only cover 45% or 45% less of their emissions now with
exactly
with trees somewhere, which is a great success. The historic judgment yesterday, but yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And Pranab, we're going to take a little break, just a 3-minute break in a few minutes. But I just wanted to directly follow up with something you've said as well. About obviously also in connection for showing solidarity, for us to get involved, for us to support local communities. Just wondering, and also about this whole how the decisions are being made from your perspective. What could be done? Like how XR is already like a global network, like connecting today. I hope, it's beneficial for everybody. But what else would be good for you in terms of like how are the decisions being made? What do you expect from movements like Extinction Rebellion?
So just to continue with the discussion that Fiore and you were having, and definitely in terms of conservation policies, the kind of conservation wildlife or protected area policies that's being propagated in India, it's to a large extent dictated by this huge wildlife NGOs like WWF or WCS. And their presence is there everywhere. You see them everywhere, but they are very opaque in terms of whenever you have to hold them accountable. And making them more accountable, or even taking them into task for their activities, it's important, and that's one thing which globally can be done. And the large capital interest in countries like India is humongous. Because there's the resources, that's also cheap human labor, and that's why the global corporations that have like huge interest in the spaces in India, when there's a struggle happening in Europe or the Americas against those oil companies or steel companies or other big industries, I mean, definitely the component of countries like the South needs to be taken into consideration, where there is inviolate destruction of not only nature, but also violation of basic fundamental human rights that's happening at every step. The humans are exploited, and mostly the cheap laborers, where are they coming from? Like if we take, for example, naturally endowed and rich states like Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand, which are tribal territories. And there you see the highest amount of violation of human rights of indigenous people, as well as nature is happening. And by corporations from across the world, from Rio Tinto to Vedanta, to name any big companies, they are there. So all these components needs to come up in the struggles that we are having, because there is a serious condition of human rights violations, of massacre of indigenous communities that are taking place in those areas in today's time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, cool. There's already like a few very interesting questions in the chat, but we will take a 3-minute break now. So I'll see you all here at just in 3 minutes. So it's 7:06 in German time. Great. I hope you had a quick, refreshing break. And we're going to continue with your questions. So I think, Stefan, you had quite a few interesting questions in the chat. Would you want to actually say them, or do you want me to read them? Yeah, you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay with saying something. Yeah, hi, and thanks for this information. It's quite interesting and a bit new. These thoughts, at least. So, yeah, what shall we do now? What concrete demand can we say now? Just stop with this and reallocate existing national parks? Or, yeah, and would it be a good idea to dismantle this lie of the 30% in order to then argue, hey, this is not just only a lie, it's the whole issue is fake? Might that be a good strategy?
I guess this is for me, right? Not for, well, maybe Pranab then want to add something. From political perspective, there are a lot of things that we can ask, because the 30% is inside a political document. So they are, and we are doing that. We are meeting with different members of the governments of the countries who are pushing more this and saying, look, this target is going to have these consequences. So we are asking them to put safeguards in the document. So to put written, indigenous people's rights have to be respected, and to consider indigenous territories as mechanisms to protect biodiversity. So let's forget about protected areas. Your entire biodiversity strategy should be about pushing for more indigenous territories. And there are a lot of technical things that they can do to support that on the paper. This is on the political negotiation. So this is from a political perspective, the thing to do is to do lobbying, like having not lobbying, like in me going somewhere, like political pressure on governments to not accept this target without safeguards for indigenous people. That is from a political level. But then there is the fact that this 30% is just, as I say, not something that a political level, I don't know, the president of France is just pushing. It is in the mind of all the people that want to protect the environment. And that's require a change in the way we protect nature. There are the safeguards and the requirements and the control, the auditing, that the accountability that Pranab was talking about, that should be put inside grants that the governments are giving to WWF. We can't change WWF if we don't change the money they are getting. And WWF is getting their money, yes, of course, for horrible corporations, but also from individual people. So we have to change public opinion, and from governments. They are getting a lot of money from government. The parks in Congo that I have been with get money from all taxpayers. So putting pressure on donors, telling them, you have to respect this law, you have to do this, you have to do that. Those requirements are not set up anywhere. They are just guidelines here and there. So the German government can give money to WWF, WWF violate human rights, and German government says it's not our fault. So we are also putting pressure on those governments to tell them, you have to make sure that your money is not funding human rights abuses. It seems obvious, but it's not. Now Germany ratified the ILO Convention 169. That is the only binding document that protects indigenous rights. So now the German government is by law obligated to respect the indigenous people's rights. And that put like German government in a different position than was before. So there is a lot of political pressure that can be done, a lot of very tangible things. What people like you and me can do, this is something much more interesting. I think that we have, as human rights defenders, as activists, as environmental activists, climate activists, we have a strong responsibility on the message we are putting out. We have to be, we are accountable for our own message. We can't be just going around yelling, we have to do something about climate change. And when the government proposes something horrible, we don't say anything because they are doing something. Doing something is not better than nothing. And this is very important. So we have to change, like decolonize also the climate movement. We have to decolonize the environmental movement. We have two very important deadlines. The meeting in Marseille happening at the beginning of this, at the beginning of September. The IUCN event is the World Conservation Congress. This event happened every 4 years. And usually they go to amazing places with beach and a lot of very far away. But this year they decided to do it in France. So we have a very huge opportunity. We are organizing something around this. I can't tell you more now, but it will be public very soon. And this is something we have to get the people all together in this opportunity to push to, you know, the IUCN, there will be the conservationists, there will be the government. It's the French government is really pushing this as their ecological flag. There will be the business, the corporate. We have to push to, well, I can't tell you what we're going to plan, but we have to push hard our narrative in that moment. And then there is China in October. And those are the key dates in which we have to do something. We are planning something to do, and we hope that also Extinction Rebellion supporters will join. But I think it's time really to give a clear message, and do something concrete, tangible. So we are thinking about it, and you will get soon the news.
Thank you already. I think, yeah, Stefan, you had like quite a few other questions, but we have, next would be Grüne Welt. Would you be okay to read your question, or yeah, just ask out here? Or do you want me to read it out? Yeah, I can maybe, there's two questions. I think after this, there's also quite a few questions for Pranab, but this one is relating to the financialization of nature, concepts like natural capital and ecosystem services. So what role do these concepts play in this? Is this being used? Are the parks used for that? And there was two questions actually about the Dasgupta review. I don't know if I said that right. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it just went out today. I have read the draft before it went out, but I haven't read the final thing. Yes, so these are all the Dasgupta review, but also other. This is just new, but we had a lot of other stuff going on there. Are pushing for this idea, as I was saying before, that we can mitigate climate change. Because climate change is produced by these emissions, that is, well, of course, carbon, among others. So these emissions can be mitigated if you do something that avoid an emission or absorb emissions. So, and this will happen, of course, in the finance world. It's a market, you know. I pollute X, so and you have a project, for example, a protected area that is saving carbon, or you plant trees that absorb carbon. So we can exchange in the market. I pay you so I can pollute. I don't know if it's clear, but it's just companies paying to keep polluting. So this is based on a lot of the terrible assumptions. But it's even worse than that, because it's destroying also environment. These are called nature-based solutions. So yeah, you know what? It's something very positive. You know, you don't have really to change your way of life, and you know, we don't have to destroy capitalism. There is a magic machine called nature, and it's here. You know, we just need to keep protecting what is there and plant trees. As I say, for them, trees are nature. So grasslands are not nature, which is another very interesting concept. Anyway, we know for sure that all of these projects, I'm not saying we shouldn't plant trees, but plant trees is not going to mitigate climate change. It's all about which kind of trees, where you plant the trees, or anyway, all of this is based on a scientific study, saying that with nature-based solutions, we could mitigate until the 37% of climate change. That scientific study is funded by conservation organizations, who is going to get money from the nature-based solution. So there is no science behind. But if you look at the figures, if you want to mitigate the 37% by planting trees, which is the main solution they are proposing, you will have to get a size of land, a land of the size of Australia. And of course, where they're going to find all that land? And this is one of the things. The second is that are the trees that are planting really going to mitigate climate change? Because the trees they are planting are trees that grow up very fast. Usually are monocultures. So eucalyptus, for example, acacia, that get fired very, very quickly, and that they are going to be they are going to take them away to produce industrial stuff. It's not that the tree is going to stay there forever. So they're going to release the carbon anyway. And also these trees that are monocultures are destroying biodiversity. And not only, and also they are being planted in places that didn't have a forest before, and that they play a role in the ecosystem, like grasslands. For conservationists, those are, in most of cases, they were forests before, but they have been cut down, which is not true, or they're empty spaces. And worst case, where those trees are planted, in the land of whom? There have been projects where indigenous people have been evicted from their land, so they got these trees planted. So this is the story about planting trees, but there is also protected areas, creating protected areas, or creating spaces where you can't do anything inside, like for example, the Red Plus projects, which are, you pay the countries to protect their forests. All of this is wrong, not only because it's not working and allows companies to keep on their own emissions, but also, what is the problem with the commodification? It's not only that they're not working like on the ground, but also they are using the same logic that got us in the situation we are now, which is the capitalist logic, which is putting a price into nature, which is thinking that the only solution for all problem is money. And this, of course, is the problem we are now, this separation between nature and human, between the idea that nature is a good, is something to exploit, is something to pay for protection, is the problem. And that's why we are here today. So I really advise you to read. So the Dagasputa report went out a couple of months ago, but there is now a review that has been done by the Green Finance Observatory. And that review is great. It has been done by someone who knows finance, not like me. I am a human rights activist. And they analyzed this report. And what they found out is that this commodification of nature that is sold by everyone as a solution to save the world is not going to save the world. And it's going to make a lot of people earn a lot of money. And that's the part that is tricky for me because I don't work in the finance. But that's what the review show. As I said, I have read the first draft, and now it's published. So I really, it's an advice. You can go to the account of Green Finance Observatory, and then you can check out the work they done. That is good.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's natural solutions and so forth is a whole another topic that when we talk about climate neutrality and so forth, we have to think about it ourselves as well in terms of our demands even for Extinction Rebellion, because we obviously have been criticized for this as well. So Chit, you had a question as well, and Shiana, I'm seeing you maybe right after. I see your hand, I'm not going to forget. And Chit, maybe you want to start first. You wrote a question in the chat as well.
Yeah, thank you. So I have two questions, one for Pranab and other for Fiore. So I will go one by one. So Pranab, question to you. Last year, Government of India wanted to implement one law, which is called EIA, like Environment Impact Assessment Law. And I think you must be aware. So can you speak something about that and where it stands today? Like, has it been put on hold or has been passed by the parliament and implemented?
Thanks for the question. And the EIA, Environment Impact Assessment, which is a rule that comes under the Forest Governance of India, definitely it gave certain measures where people could check on projects which are not beneficial for the communities or people living around. So environment impact assessment is like an independent committee which is formed that has to carry out a scientific study on any project and the kind of impact that it is going to have on the environment around that area. And that report is put out for the public to put their comments on it, and also to hold public hearings where, based on that report, the communities will either give their consent or they will disagree. And 75%, if I'm not wrong, is of the affected communities or the people who has to give consent in order for a project proposal to be agreed or to be granted. But somehow in India, I mean, though EIA was a progressive piece of document, progressive piece of act and rule, never worked out the way it is supposed to be, like most of the things, like Forest Right Act and all the progressive laws and acts that we have here. And EIA, even though with its minimum impact, had somehow managed to give some entitlement and right to communities on the ground. And now the government wants to get away with that and make for easy inroads to companies or to industries to take up forest or environmentally important areas so that they don't have to come up. This thing, I guess, like I have not been able to, I mean, since the debate also has come down and it's not been much on the public sphere right now, I don't know the exact position of what the EIA status right now is. But as far as I remember, the government was pushing in order to dilute it so that most of the companies or the projects or industries would not have to get any EIA clearance in order to create an industry or get land from people or to destroy any environmentally fragile areas. One of the prime examples, if I give, of the failure of EIA is the one which I can give from my own experience. So there's the Finland government, there's the Dutch government and the Indian government who are tying up, who are collaborating to set up an biorefinery very close to where I live, very close to Kaziranga. It's so the plan is to produce bioethanol from bamboo. And bamboo somehow is already a scarce resource. And with the use of bamboo for indigenous communities and their day-to-day existence, and also the importance of bamboo for the wildlife. So it's also an area of Kaziranga or the northeast, like Assam, basically. It's also a densely elephant territory where there's a lot of elephants. And so the plan is to set up this biorefinery very close to Kaziranga. And so when we based, and the report which they came up with, the environment impact assessment report, there was a consultancy, mostly the companies hire some consultants to prepare these reports. And this, most of the time, these reports are highly plagiarized. And even this report for the clearance of the biorefinery was plagiarized from some companies somewhere in different places and had no resemblance to the reality of this place. And in the public hearing, which was done officially, when we went to protest, when the local communities went out to say that since this project doesn't comply with the demands that we need or the kind of safeguards that we need, we don't want this project to come up here. But the government, along with the company, in collusion, they completely silenced our voice. Not only that, they had like goons who were there just to disrupt the meeting. They created a scenario over there, and in that process, we were arrested in that meeting, and our voices were not heard. Those are the kind of practices that go around in the name of like holding public hearings and stuff. I'm sure you know about it. And so EIA, though it's an important piece of legislation, I think the government wants to get rid of it so that they can carry on with the just to say give advantage to the interest of the corporations of the capitalist class, and get rid of the piece of legislation so that they could carry on with their exploitation even more easily. Another prime example is also the Bagjan oil spill case, which happened in a major a very important, very ecologically valuable hotspot called Dibru-Soikwa Biosphere Reserve, which is also a national park. And the oil companies were given permission to drill inside the national park. And as a result of which, since it was done very unscientifically, a fire blew out, there was an oil spill, and a huge loss of wildlife habitat took place, and also human loss took place. And these are the examples that come out of because of the faulty implementation of acts like the Environment Impact Assessment, the rules that are supposed to be followed, or the Forest Right Act that is supposed to be respected. But this laws are somehow now they're trying to dilute all the, in India, like they're trying to dilute all this pro-people acts and laws and make it more business friendly, so that they could be easily traded off, like to cater to the larger green capitalist or the green economy that that is being designed now. And was there something else?
No, thanks, Pranab. I think you answered my question pretty much. Can I go for the second question, please, for Fiore?
Go for it.
Yeah, Fiore, a question to you. So we know that the majority of companies are coming from Europe, and today European Union is the biggest economic bloc on this planet with lots of huge influence, whether it's economy or politics. So no matter it's a land or water or sky, the majority of polluters are also coming from Europe, like big corporations. So how could we, like climate activists or climate change, champions, we influence European Union or request them that they should influence the decisions which, how to stop this ongoing destruction? Because unless the root cause is fixed, we'll keep talking about symptoms, and global south countries doesn't have that much cloud, at international level. So they are at the receiving end. So, and can you please give someone examples or a few policies which could be pressed upon and which will yield some positive results?
Yes, well, of course we live in democracy, so we can't, well, as you all know, corporations are not always controlled or regulated by governments, but governments still have a powerful say, and those governments are elected. So I think the problem is that most of the people are believing in the things they are saying, are not pushing for this. One of the examples I gave is that when we saw that massive amount of mobilization for climate change, this mobilization, which hasn't happened for social justice before, not so massive, at least not in all Europe. We could see similar mobilization of public opinion about these ideas we are discussing about today, about the fact that corporations shouldn't be able to pollute as they want, or shouldn't be able to destroy the life of the people, that conservation organizations should be accountable of the destruction of the planet and the people. We would see people going in the street claiming social justice, and not just climate change. That can be something that also corporations can I don't know, reinterpret. I think we would be in a different position. I think we are accountable for this separation between environmental issues, climate issues, and on one hand, and on the other hand, social justice issues. And this is something we can do. We, not only like Extinction Rebellion, all of us, like Survival, and the climate activists. Where are mostly of the most famous climate activists today? Where are most of them have been pushing nature-based solutions in their social media account. And I think this is something we can do. And in the moment we decide to go to the street and we decide to write on a placard, I am fighting for climate change and not for climate justice, or not for social justice, this is our fault. It's not the corporation fault. We, of course, are there just waiting that they can use something we do for their own benefits. This fight will never end. I'm not saying that we are going to win it. This is a fight that's going to go, and it has always been like this. But there is something we can do. At least I say, be very careful with our messages. No compromise. And in a radical, we have to be radical the day of today. We can't allow any more and uncompromised. And when a government as Germany is going to push for the 30%, and you say what we can do, well, all the politicians around, all the parties are completely on side. So well, except some people that are not. The Green Party today, where is the Green Party? Why the Green Party is not opposing the 30%? So, and the Green Party is not there because God put them. They have been voted by the people. So where are today the request of the people that cares about the environment on these issues? So we have to push this debate inside political parties. We have to push this debate in the public opinion. The day of today is so difficult to get an article in any German newspaper or any French newspaper that criticizes WWF. It's impossible. But they cover climate topics, but they never want to talk about these issues. They never want to talk about the fact that protected areas are destroying the life of people, that you can't mitigate climate change with trees, that is an invention. It's very difficult to get these things in the public opinion. And this is something that the people that are the people that have the spokespersons of the movement, the people that have a visibility should be talking about. And it's not impossible. As today, everyone is talking about climate change. How that happened, it was not because Shell wanted. In the same way that there has been a change in public opinion toward climate change, we can get a change in public opinion toward these topics. It's not impossible, but we have to be very careful of our message. Otherwise, corporations will, as I say, take advantage of the thing. You have seen what happened with climate change, how easy they change from denying it to, this is a great opportunity for our market. So we have to be very careful. An intangible thing, there are a lot of laws and a lot of agreements that can be changed. The grants that are going today to protect the environment, European biodiversity strategy, the laws about climate that are going, I don't know in Germany, but in France it has been approved a law about the climate. All those moments are moments to push for the idea. Yes, climate change is terrible, but it's a consequence of a terrible system that has to change. So I don't care that they tell me, we are going to mitigate and solve your problem of climate change, or we are going to fight against plastic. If then we ask half of the world to starve, it doesn't make sense. These are the moments to push for a different messaging, to push for a different law. And it's possible. We try to push this narrative inside some laws in France, and it worked very well. But we have to. It's not only to talk with the politicians. It's to show the politicians there is a public opinion behind that is pushing for this. WWF decided to do new policies because the donors, the European Commission, say, "I'm not going to give you more money if you keep violating the rights." And the reason why the European Commission did this, it was because we did a scandal. We sent everyone who was possible to be sent, the United Nations and some politicians, the TV shows from several countries, the newspaper, we sent them to see what was going on. It's just a change in public opinion that can really make things change. And it's not impossible. It has shown in the past a lot of time to work. So, But as I say, we have to be very careful about our message. We can't just go in the street and claim they have to do something about climate change. We have to take care of a narrative. Otherwise, they will use it for their own benefits.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And before Priska, I saw you have some questions, but maybe we have Shiana, if you could have your comment, be interesting to hear from you.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, thanks a lot, Pranab and Fiore. It's been really interesting. Yeah, my comment, well, there's a few things I'd like to say, but I'll just try and kind of stick to one or two things. Fiore, you were talking about how, the creation of protected areas is, it comes purely from a scientific point of view, and it's divorced from sort of the sort of social side of it. But that's not really what I wouldn't completely agree with that, because I mean, there is, in my research, quite a bit of understanding within sort of conservation science that you have to work with people who live in these places, and there's quite a lot of scientific papers about that, really, about not kicking people out in order to protect nature. I mean, and one major sort of report that came out 2 years ago was from the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES, which is it's not an agency, but anyway, it's affiliated to the UN, and it's feeding into the CBD COP that's happening in October. So it will be considered in terms of this post-2020 framework on biodiversity that they want to bring in. But that it's a global assessment of the state of nature. It was very kind of influential at the time. It talks quite a bit about Indigenous people and how how a lot of biodiverse land, or the majority of land with the best biodiversity is situated on Indigenous lands. So I think there is, and it wasn't just biologists who contributed to that report. There were quite a lot of social scientists as well. And so I think there is a coming together of these kind of understandings, and the draft framework that is on the CBD website at the moment, that talks about protecting rights of people and having people's voices being heard, including Indigenous people. It makes specific reference to them. So I'm not as pessimistic as you are. I think there's quite a lot of room for leverage, actually. I think these things are very much, of the rights of Indigenous people it's being talked about. I mean, how much it's going to be respected on the ground is a different matter. But the term protected area, sorry, I'm going on a lot, so I'll try to keep it short. The term protected area isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it can mean whatever you want it to mean, and I think I don't think it's inherently a bad thing. I think what you said about bringing in human rights protections as conditions of those protected areas and conditions of grant giving and funding are really important. And yeah, there's the ILO convention that you mentioned, but there's also the UN convention, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which isn't a binding convention, but it contains very high standards in terms of protecting Indigenous people. So yeah, that's really what I wanted to say. I don't know if you've got any.
Yeah, I have something too. Thank you very much for your feedback. So there are a couple of things that we have to, I think it's important to clarify. The fact that everyone is saying that we should respect Indigenous people doesn't mean they are respecting it. The IPBES report has been published almost 2 years ago, I think, and no one actually used it. And WWF policy on Indigenous people has been published in the 1996. And I can confirm that all the protected areas created after the 1996 has been done in violation of the Indigenous people's rights. So of course they will do these policies because that's what they have to do. But that doesn't mean that anything is changing on the field. Second, a protected area is not whatever we want. A protected area has a definition that is an IUCN definition, and there are 5 different categories of protected areas. In the first 3 and almost always in the 4th, there is no human activities allowed. And that's not something that you can change. That is what is written. And those, the category 1 and 2, which are the most restricted, are the ones who are more spread in Africa, especially in Africa. So it's not that you can interpret it whatever you want. It's clearly that we can't interpret it in the way we want. The other thing that is very important is that in the document, there is no really mention of indigenous people's rights and the respect of the right in the creation of protected areas. Getting their voice being listened doesn't mean that the rights are respected. In the document, they talk about participation of indigenous people. And it's the same thing when WWF talk about consultation of indigenous people. They don't have to participate or consult. They have rights, and the rights have to be respected. They don't have to be even recognized because the rights are there already, and the rights have to be respected. And they don't do it by chance that they didn't include that in the target. They didn't include it because they don't think that, because if WWF and the government have to respect indigenous people's rights, they know very well that the protected areas they want to create are not going to take place. Because as the IPBES report show, mostly of protected areas are not equal or fair managed. They are done by the eviction of indigenous people. Everyone knows that, and even WWF acknowledged that, because in their own report that they commissioned in the independent review, that they paid and commissioned by themselves, it's appeared that none of the protected areas they have under investigation was respecting the rights of the people. This, nevertheless, it's written on the paper since 1996, which is more than like half of the existence of WWF, and they still don't respect their rights. So I really appreciate that they did it, but they are just doing it because they think that's what the public will believe. If you go to see the investigations that have been done, every investigation achieved the same conclusions that we are saying here. There is no one who had no independent, I don't know any independent institution, even the university institution, that have done also like a review about the 30% target, and they are not achieving the same conclusion. I gave the global framework to lawyers who said the language is very weak, and there is no commitment to respect indigenous people's rights in this draft. And they know even indigenous people participating in this process complain about it. So this is clear to everyone, and they do it on purpose. When I talked to the government, every government, Switzerland, France, Germany, they all say, yes, indigenous people's rights are important. I say, wait, why you don't include their rights in the framework? Well, it wouldn't cost anything to them just to add, and indigenous people's rights have to be respected. They don't do it because they want those lands. And they think that those people should be evicted and that the way of life should change so they become market consumers. They always say, WWF say, we can give them alternative livelihood. You don't have to give them alternative livelihood. You have to give them the land, not alternative livelihood. And that for me is very important. If you look at, I understand that it can be very tricky because they say something and then there's something else is happening, but they don't do things by chance. Language is very important. So if you go to analyze the language that is written there, you will see it's the same thing with consultation and consent. There are two different things. One thing is carry on consultations. Another thing is obtain the consent, which is very different. And you will see, if you start analyzing the document, even everyone agrees you should participate in consultation, but then consent is something different. There is nowhere a mention of consent, by the way, in the draft.
Yeah, I'm not saying there is. I have read the draft. There is weak language in it, and I'm also not saying that, I'm not disagreeing with what you say about how WWF have acted up till now. I'm just saying that because there is at least some acknowledgement of Indigenous people's participation, that can be used as leverage in terms of funding WWF and putting conditions on their funding. I just think that is a really crucial kind of element to this. So I just wanted to say that, and there are good, high standards in international law at the moment, and it's a case of, you know, using those because yeah, I mean, obtaining consent is part of the declaration. I mean, yeah, I totally understand that it's not being respected on the ground, but if that becomes, you know, part of how, you know, the conditions that governments make, then that could be a game changer.
Yes, it could be useful, but if you challenge them, if you tell them, like, European Commission suspended the funding to WWF for a project because we told them, we showed them, we brought evidence that this park is in violation of human rights. They discovered that the park, they didn't know it before, and they suspended the funding. This is something, you know, independently of what the law says, WWF will think, well, I would want to get more money if I violate, like, they don't care, like, if to violate, it's not about violating human rights. They only care when you stop the money. Or the European Union only care when you threaten them that you will sue them if they don't do something. So the law, there's not, as I was saying, it's not about like principles or the standards or guidelines. They have to be laws, because when there is a law, there is accountability. Without accountability, there is no justice. And to make those governments accountable, they have to be something. Even the global framework doesn't make any sense. You know, it's just a framework. It's not even binding. They have to be something that is you can go to a court, you can find a mechanism to get them accountable. Otherwise, it's like, that is why we are pushing so much to get laws where there are requirements for granting conservation. Because then if they violate the law, they are unaccountable. And that is something important.
Thank you so much. There's still quite a few questions, and we will finish at around 8 p.m. today. I know this is like it's a super important topic, and like I'm sure there's other possibilities also to go deeper and look into organizing something this year. But yeah, I would like to give Priska the chance to ask her questions, and then afterwards we can hear also from Peter.
My question to Pranab was how the poverty in these areas, the poverty of the people, is also a basic of the abuse of biodiversity, like the rhino or the wood. This is the first one, and the second one, it goes together because important is that I think it is important to build these healthy communities, and I would like to know how you face this contradiction. Yeah.
Thanks, Priska. Could you please repeat the second part of the question? I didn't get it. Could you kindly repeat the second part of the question?
The second part of the question is, you, if I understood well, you are activists in one of these areas, and you told before like how the difficulties were, and what do you do as organization, or you as person, to build healthy communities in the sense of preventing poverty among you, and to live with nature and to be part of the nature. So how do you do it? Because I think it's a background why I have this question, because I think it's very important for us living in this capitalist metropolitan landscape to understand how it is to live well and good and have a good life in these areas where you are living.
Yeah. Thanks. I mean, it's a very important question. I feel like when the first part where you say definitely like there is lesser amount of capital richness in the areas that we live in. I mean, the whole notion of say a good life could be very different, like you said. So here, definitely, like a lot of people in the peripheries or the communities do not maybe own cars or big houses, but it's not like that matters to them, to everyone. So it's also a very subjective understanding of like how poverty is looked at, and I feel like a lot of the communities here are very self-sustainable, And if we talk in terms of the wildlife or the protected area perspective, here I don't see poverty or the poor people being the ones who are destroying wildlife, who are destroying the forest. I mean, it's the greed of people who mostly are from the cities. I mean, you go to a house in the community here, you don't find like elaborate furnitures or big beds and sofas and things. Like all the woods have disappeared. Where have they gone? I mean, it has gone to big buildings, high-rises buildings somewhere in the city. I mean, the whole mercantile economy started in the colonial times, where these areas were cleared of their forest by the British demand, the industrial demand. And even today, it's the cities and the big industries or the class of people with a lot of money that is the pull factor for wildlife resources. Similarly, with the wild rhinos as well, that's what I have been reiterating, that the rhino, use of rhino, it's a wild animal. It's an ancient being. It's great in the wild. I mean, it doesn't have any food value or it doesn't have any ornamental value for the people living around. So why would they want to kill a rhino? There's no pull as such. And similarly, it's the pull from an international market where it is used as an ornament or medicinal or for whatever medicines people use, I mean, which is created. And those are the factors that are destroying. It's not the poverty or the poorness or the objective reality of the people here that is being detrimental to the conservation of forest. And I guess, yeah, that's why like this whole debate of like the capitalist system and the other part on the other hand, so are we questioning the system or are we trying to put the blame on the poor local indigenous people? So, I mean, I would rather say it's the larger system, the whole monetary system, the capitalist system, the extractive industrial system that is to be blamed. And I, as an activist, I belong to this place, and definitely it's also the movement for justice is a global one. It's a universal one where we all stand together. And as someone having to bear the direct brunt or a direct confrontation with the system, which is not very friendly, is definitely a challenge. And we counter that with grassroots solidarity, with people becoming more aware, people becoming more resilient, and also understanding their rights, understanding the law, and also just standing up. And a lot of time, like, all the laws and everything, our rights are there in the books, in the constitution. But when it comes to the ground, when we are on the verge of, say, fighting out on the street, I mean, where like they're coming to displace you and you have to just confront them, then it's basically a solidarity of men, women, children, who everyone has to come together. And that's where we see a lot of rights being violated, where because there's not enough attention, or like all the international ratifications or UN declarations, which holds no value when it comes to that point of day-to-day presence or existence or fighting for your rights, where that's where like a lot of casualties happen, where a lot of people are killed, where we are sent to jail again and again just for raising the basic fundamental question for justice, for right. And even the system knows, I mean, that we are the ones who are asking legitimate questions, but then they find ways to criminalize us. And that's a constant fight we have to stand against. And more visibility is basically important. We're definitely important, more and more people standing together, because in today's India, even the freedom of press is not present. Like the press freedom has been muffled, and like now Twitter, Facebook, everything is monitored. Just now I got a message that one young boy got arrested just for putting up a message on Facebook criticizing some of the steps of the present chief minister. That's the condition we are living in. And so it's a day-to-day struggle, and we have to keep fighting. And then the international fraternity comes to support, and when all of you stand together, it gives us strength.
Thank you so much. I know you had one more question, but I would like to give the word to Peter Donatus. Thank you so much for joining as well today. Do you want to,
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. I don't have my camera on because I'm on the road and my internet connection is not so good. So I hope you are hearing me good.
Yes.
Okay. My question will go to the brother from India, but both may choose to answer the question. I been having a feeling for so many years, and now it has it's so visible now that each time we've been in a struggle for decades, complaining about the same thing, about the destruction of our environment, of our livelihood, of our cultural identities as indigenous people. Nobody pays ears to us. But as soon as a white, especially a white European person or people picks these topics up, then it gets a boost that we would have actually want to have all these years back, would have prevented thousands of people losing their lives. So, and because this is also about decolonizing the climate justice movement itself, because I see it as another form of racism. Unconscious racism, I would prefer to say that even when we have a just cause, we find it very difficult to put it across to the world, and the world find it, or even when we do, they don't take us serious until maybe a teenage white person, even a teenage white person, picks that topic up, and then it gets a boost. It's a very important question for us all, not only in Germany, but globally, because we need to talk about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Those were like very relevant observations, and I completely agree with your observations. And definitely that voice has always been there from our part, and against the very racial way that the global economy or nationalities function. And somehow we also feel that this whole 30% deal, that's why I mean it needs to be put out very out there in a very clear manner, that it's also kind of an apartheid against the majority of the global South marginalized communities. And we know that this 33% is going to be falling on us, like it's on communities like us on the margins. And the solidarity definitely needs to be built more stronger between the global South, and all of us need to stand together with all the fellow comrades and people who are standing there from Europe or the Americas. And I think that's the way forward. And not to lose, I mean, since you say, I mean, I do agree that the same question has been repeated for so long. Historically, our ancestors, our generations have been asking the same questions. And today, we are also continuing with the same queries and the same demands and the same fight. And the only road that we are left is also to continue fighting and not lose heart. And I do take inspiration from your words. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Peter, that's a very important point. Thank you for raising that again. And I hope, yeah, we at Extinction Rebellion are taking this to heart, the people that are here today. And I hope that we can do more connection work in the future and have more conversations around this and amongst us. To start with. So yeah, I would like to thank you everybody for joining today. It's been super interesting and intense and eye-opening, I think. There is a lot of research already on this. You can find a lot of information on the Survival International page, a lot of the researches, a lot of the data. And also for Extinction Rebellion, if you check out our campaign, Nature Needs Justice. So a team here, of which Grüne Welt has been part of as well, and others here have put together super valuable and in-depth information in German and in English, and you can find it on our Extinction Rebellion website. So that's called Nature Needs Justice. Thank you. Yeah, there's the link in the chat as well. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining on a Friday evening. Pranab, thank you so much for staying up even later than it is here already. And Fiore, thanks so much for the valuable inputs. You've shared your email as well, so I think it's okay for people to reach out to you. Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, well, have a great evening. Tino, any advertising block for next week? No, nothing yet. Okay, well then, thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you very much.
We are here and we won't go away. We can just not wait another day. We will fight for our dreams. Hope dies. Action begins.